Good evening. We are reading Haunted by R.L. Stine. This is Fear Street. And this is a really good book. Please join me. All right, we are on page 99. They had disappeared into thin air. She slid into the passenger seat and closed her eyes, even with her eyelids shut tight. The flashing red light didn't go away. Buddy talked excitedly about what a great club Red Heat was, and what a great sound system they had, and how they should go there more often. But what a shame it was that the club was so expensive. He had obviously decided to forget the fact that they had had an argument and that Melissa had stormed out of the club. Yes, they have gotten expensive. My son is talking about a beer is like $5. I remember happy hour. A beer was $1. Melissa had to struggle to remember what the argument had been about. Paul, of course. It was about Paul. Maybe Buddy figured if he ignored the whole thing, Paul would just go away. Melissa wished Buddy was right. If only Paul would go away. An hour later in bed, Melissa couldn't get to sleep. When she closed her eyes, she saw Paul and his friends, saw them shoving one another against the cars, tilting their heads back to drink from the brown bags, saw them circling her, closing in on her. She couldn't get Paul's face out of her mind, and his cruel laughter, the way he threatened her, the way he grabbed her fiercely, the way he looked at her, the way he hated her. Yes, that was what Melissa found so frightening. But Paul hated her. She didn't even know him. He hated her. It was a warm, humid night, but she pulled the covers up to her chin. The bedroom window was closed and locked. The street light down below cast a pale shadow light onto the ceiling. I've never been hated before, Melissa thought. Sure, there had been kids who didn't like her very much, kids she didn't get along with, but she had never been hated so blindly, so heatedly. Never. He really has come back to kill me, she thought. Somehow she had never taken his threat seriously. She had thought she could reason with him, talk to him, help him. He had seemed jealous of Buddy, after all, and because of that, Melissa had even fooled herself into thinking that maybe Paul wasn't so bad after all. But seeing him there on that dark parking lot with his friends, seeing how he fought them, how hard he was, how bitter, how cruel, she realized that she was wrong about him. He would never be her friend. He could kill her. He meant what he said. He hated her that much. She sat straight up when she felt the rush of cold air. A few seconds later, Paul appeared. First, a dark outline in front of the window, then a shadowy form moving quickly to the foot of her bed. Melissa couldn't see her face. It was covered in shadow. She saw that he was still wearing the straight-legged blue denim jeans and the faded denim jacket. She started to move closer. "Get out of here," she screamed, gripping the covers. "Stay away from me. Leave me alone." The ghost seemed to float up until he was booming above her glowing dark eyes, staring coldly down at her. "Get out," Melissa repeated, feeling his eyes burn into hers. "Just go away." The ghost began to fade. The eyes dimmed. The face darkened. The floating form became a dim outline, shadows of gray against the pale light from the street. "I'll be back. I'm not finished here," Paul said, words more chilling than the air he left behind. Oh my goodness. We are on chapter 14. No, I can't, Della. Not this morning, anyway. Melissa pulled back the curtains and looked out the bedroom window. It was a gray day, heavy, dark clouds covering the sky. She shifted the phone from one ear to the other. Yeah, buddy, I have a pretty good time last night. She didn't feel like getting into it with Della. First thing in the morning, she realized she hadn't confided at all in her best friend. She wanted to tell her about Paul. She needed to. Della would probably believe her, and Melissa desperately needed someone to believe her. I tell her all about it when my parents are away, when I stay in her house this weekend, Melissa thought. They chatted aimlessly for a few more minutes. Then Melissa promised to call her later, hung up, and went down to breakfast. She found her mother wearing a maroon running suit at the table with the morning paper and a half-eaten dry English muffin. Her father, leaning on the kitchen counter, was having a heated telephone discussion with someone about a plane reservations. Morning, Mrs. Dryden muttered from behind her paper. Who's Daddy talking to? Melissa asked, pouring herself a bowl of cornflakes. Travel agent, her mother said, chewing the dry, toasted muffin. Some problem with our tickets to Las Vegas. He's going in late today. She lowered the paper and stared at Melissa. Look at the rings under your eyes. Melissa put down the milk carton. Mother, that's physically impossible. You can't look at your own eyes. Didn't you sleep? Not too well, Melissa admitted. The sweatshirt is wrinkled, her mother said, folding the newspaper. I know, I'm a sloth. Didn't it used to be white? No, Mother, it was always gray. Melissa made a face. I'm not interested in your problems, Mr. Dryden's voice boomed into the phone. You have to get us boarding passes with our tickets. I'm not taking the chance of being bumped from the plane. I know how airlines overbook these days. Poor Daddy, Melissa said, with a mouthful of cornflakes. I really think you should change your mind, her mother said. What? You know. Come to the conventions with us. It'll do you good to get away. You've had such a boring summer. Melissa laughed. Believe me, Mother, it hasn't been boring. Melissa, her mother looked disappointed. Yes. You won't come? No, really, I don't think so. Melissa pretended to concentrate on her cornflakes. Running away to Las Vegas, she knew, wouldn't help her. She had to find out the truth about Paul. Find out what really happened to him. It was the only way she could get rid of him. The only way he would leave her alone. Melissa ate quickly, pushed her chair away from the table, waving to her father, headed toward the front door. Where are you off to? Mrs. Dryden called after her. I'm meeting Della, Melissa lied. Looks like rain, her mother said. I won't melt. The sky looked a little less threatening at the back as she backed her car down the drive. The clouds had lifted. They looked as if they might blow past without leaving any rain. Melissa turned down Mill Road and headed toward town. The dashboard clock read 11:58. How had she slept so late? She turned into a large shop-and-stop parking lot on Division Street and slowly cruised the rows of cars looking for a parking place. Maybe today won't be a total waste of time like yesterday, she thought. Maybe today I'll find some answers about Paul. Melissa had recognized one of the boys with Paul in the parking lot the night before. His name was Frankie. She couldn't remember his last name. She thought he looked familiar, but she didn't remember who he was until it came to her in the middle of the night. He delivered groceries for the shop and stop. The parking lot was completely full, so Melissa had to park on the street outside the lot. She climbed out, locked the car, and crossed the lot, walking quickly, starting to feel nervous. Frankie, she had noticed, had hung back the night before. He hadn't threatened her or stood in her way. In fact, he had seemed a little embarrassed by the whole incident. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking on Melissa's part. Anyway, she told herself talking to him while he's at work is perfectly safe. He's not going to try anything in the middle of the supermarket. Frankie was her only clue now, the only person she knew who actually could tell her about Paul, who maybe could clear everything up for her. I hope he's here today, I hope. I can find him. The electric doors swung open with a loud buzz, and Melissa stepped into the frigid air of the vast supermarket, with its chattering shopping carts and the rhythmic beeping of the computerized cash registers. She walked through the produce department past a tall display of some new kind of cherry soda. She was surprised to see Frankie without having to search for him. He was at the end of the nearest checkout line, bagging groceries for a young woman with a baby in a carrier on her back. Melissa hesitated, wondering what she was going to say to him. Maybe this is a stupid idea, she thought. Frankie looked up, having packed the last of the groceries, and saw her. At first he seemed confused, as if he didn't remember who she was. Then suddenly a broad smile of recognition spread over his face. As Melissa walked up to him, the smile faded, replaced by a wary look. "Frankie?" she asked uncertainly. "Hey, look. I don't want no trouble," he said, waving her away. His straight brown hair was tied behind his head in a short ponytail. He was wearing a long white shop and stop apron over black jeans and a crisp blue work shirt. "No, Melissa started. "I didn't do nothing last night. The other guys, I didn't think they should have." His voice trailed off. He was looking past Melissa to a large woman behind a counter, probably his supervisor. "I didn't come because of last night. I want to ask you something else." He shook his head, straightened his stack of brown groceries. "It'll only take a minute, I promise," Melissa pleaded. He hesitated. "Well, okay. I'll take my break now." He walked over and said something to the woman behind the counter, then motioned for Melissa to follow him. She followed him down the long produce aisle to a large storeroom against the back wall. It was even colder in this room and smelled of rotting fruits and vegetables. Frankie pulled down a wooden crate and motioned for her to sit down. Melissa lowered herself onto the crate and crossed her legs. He continued to stand. "I only got 10 minutes for any break," he said, waving to two guys unloading lettuce from big crates into a shopping cart. "I want to ask you about Paul," Melissa said, unsure of how to start. Frankie smiled. "You really got the hots for Paul, huh?" Melissa could feel herself blushing. "No, that's not why. I mean, listen, you and Paul were friends." "Yeah, we're buddies. Paul's a pretty bad dude." "Bad dude? What do you mean by bad?" she asked uncomfortably, suddenly feeling very stupid, wishing she hadn't come here. Frankie shrugged. "He's just bad, that's all." His face filled with suspicion. "Hey, listen, if Paul did something wrong, or something, I don't know anything about it." "No, listen, I mean, he's my buddy, but I don't go along with some things. I mean, I don't know anything at all, really." Frankie looked up at the clock above the storeroom door. Melissa realized this wasn't going well at all. She decided she'd better get to the point. When did Paul die?" she asked. Frankie's mouth dropped open. He pulled at his ponytail. Huh? Paul, When did he die? Can you tell me? Paul's dead? He sat down on the floor next to Melissa. When? Last night? No, wait. That's impossible. I talked to him on the phone this morning before work. Now Melissa was completely confused. Maybe we're talking about different Pauls, she said. Yeah, maybe. Frankie still looked very upset. The Paul I'm talking about died some time ago, Melissa said. Frankie got to his feet, so, hey, you really scared me. I'm sorry, Melissa stammered. Paul, but I wanted to ask you. Frankie looked up at the clock again. Hey, sorry, but I gotta get back to work, and I need a soda first. If I'm late after a break, I'll be busted. He turned and hurried from the storeroom. The swinging doors closed behind him. Melissa sat on the crate for a few minutes, staring at the stack of crates against the wall, trying to make sense of what he had just told her. It didn't make sense. They were talking about the same Paul. That was the only thing Melissa was certain of. But was Paul dead or alive, or living, breathing human, or a ghost? She knew that Paul was a ghost. He told her he was a ghost. He appeared and disappeared like a ghost. So how could Frankie not realize that his buddy was dead? How could he have talked to Paul before going to work? Melissa stood up and walked slowly out of the storeroom, feeling as disappointed as she was confused. Frankie had been her one clue, her one hope, but he had only helped to make things more baffling than ever. As she walked past him to exit, Frankie looked up from the bag he was packing and gave her a curious look. He thinks I'm crazy, Melissa thought. Maybe I am. Stepping outside the supermarket, she saw that the pavement was wet. It must have rained while she was inside, and now the sky was clearing, sunlight sparkling off the wet cars in the parking lot. She walked around a large puddle and headed for her car. Thinking about Frankie, she didn't see the car backing out of its place until it nearly hit her. Watch where you're going, a woman's voice yelled. Melissa dodged away, shocked to her alertness, and stepped into the puddle, cold water splashing over her sneakers. I've got to pay attention, she thought, making her way the endless rows of cars to the street. She heard footsteps behind her, but didn't think anything of them. A car trunk slammed shut. A baby was crying back by the supermarket. She heard the footsteps again as she turned the corner and headed down the last rows of cars. They sounded closer behind her now. She turned around just to see who it was, and saw a flash of color in someone ducked behind a car. What's going on, she wondered. What was she seeing? She turned and started walking again, a little faster. She took several steps and then spun around again. Again, a flash of dark color. A dark blue jacket, maybe. Dark hair. Whoever it was disappeared behind the blue Toyota. Someone's following me. That was her first thought. It looks like Paul. That was her second. But why would Paul hide behind a car? He could appear and disappear. He didn't have to hide. Should she stop and wait him out? No, she could feel the fear creeping up her body, clutching at her throat. No, she decided to run. She turned and ignoring the puddles, began running to the street. He isn't following me, is he? No, he isn't. He can't be. Yes, the footsteps scraping against the pavement, splashing through the puddles, right behind her now, closer, running faster than she was. What was the point of running? She stopped and turned. Paul? He stepped closer and grabbed her shoulder. Oh my. We're on chapter 15. If you like this, the full version will be eventually when I finish the book on YouTube. And if you like YA horror mystery adventures, They're spooky and creepy. You may like my book, Vampire Juice. Here's the short blurb. Amanda and Sean stumble upon a mysterious can of juice while searching for Halloween costumes at a local store. Despite being kicked out by the sales clerk, they become obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the strange drink. With the help from some local bullies, she sneaks back into the store through a crypt in the graveyard, only to find themselves in the midst of a spine-chilling adventure. All right. So we are on chapter 15. Paul? He grinned at her. A hard, cold grin, not friendly, not amused. His hand tightened on her shoulder. Paul, why? You miss me, huh? What? What do you mean? I heard you calling me back there. Let go, Paul. You're hurting me. He eased his grip but didn't release her. I thought I saw you follow me, so I called you. Let go of me. He slowly let go. He was standing close to her, too close. He pressed his face close to her cheek. She could feel his breath, not against her skin. Feel his breath? Did a ghost breathe? This is interesting. Frightened, she took a step back, but he moved forward, staying with her. Why'd you run away last night? He asked, his dark, cold eyes staring into hers. You and me could have a good thing going. You're so awful, she said. And those disgusting friends of yours. Hey, they're my buddies. He seemed amused by her reaction to them. They're good guys. What do you want, Paul? She took another step back and realized she had backed into a trunk of a big Oldsmobile. He moved forward, blocking her escape. If he took one more step, she'd be pinned against the truck. What do I want? He laughed. What does any red-blooded American boy want from a nice-looking girl? Get away from me. Let me go. Why are you acting like this? He looked hurt. Hey, listen. You came on to me last night. I did not. Look that way to me. I don't understand. Why are you acting like such a creep? I've been trying to help you. Huh? Like I promised, huh? He looked confused. He scratched the side of his face, then unbuttoned his denim jacket, revealing a blue, sleeveless t-shirt underneath. You want to help me? He gave her a dirty grin. She shoved him and pulled away from the trunk, running hard between the cars to get to her car on the street. Hey, he called, trotting after her. Don't run away again. I thought you wanted to help me. Just go away, she shouted. Now you're hurting my feelings. He called several yards behind her. I don't like that. I don't like it when rich, snobby girls hurt my feelings. He's crazy, she thought. I've got to get away from him. She reached her car, pulled the door handle. It didn't budge. She forgot she had locked it. She plugged her hand into her bag and began frantically rummaging around for her keys. By now, he had caught up to her. Smiling triumphantly, he grabbed her bag and held it out of her reach. Give it back, she demanded, reaching for it and missing. He backed up, laughing, still holding her bag high above his head. Give it back, Paul. He laughed again. Come and get it. Paul, she grabbed for it, but he twirled away, keeping it out of her reach. Give it back, now. You're not funny. He didn't give back the bag, and his smile faded. You're not going to give me a chance, are you? He said. What? You heard me. I don't know what you're talking about. Just give me back my bag. I'm not a bad guy, really, but you'd never want to find that out. Paul, you're talking crazy. Please give me back my bag. I've got to go. She made another wild grab for the bag. He pulled it out of her reach and drew it under his arm. I can play rough, he said, his dark eyes wild as they stared into hers. I can play real rough, if I have to. Paul, come on, she cried. How did you know my name? He demanded. What? You told it to me. I never did. Come on, tell me. Where'd you learn my name? Paul, don't be ridiculous. She saw the police car before he did. The black and white car, cruising slowly, pulled up beside her car. The officer on the passenger side poked his head out the window. Problem here? No problem, Melissa answered quickly. As Paul handed her back her bag, she expected him to disappear into thin air, but he stood there frozen on the spot, staring at the policeman, a phony-looking smile on his face. Well, I think there is a problem, the policeman said. He turned and said something to his partner behind the wheel. Then he opened the door and, eyeing Melissa and Paul, slowly stepped out of the police car. This your car? He asked Melissa. She nodded, glancing at Paul, who was standing with his hands behind his back, looking very pale and worried. Well, it's in a no parking zone. He pointed to a tall sign several yards away. You're supposed to park inside the lot, not outside. What's your name? Can I see your driver's license? Melissa Dryden, she said, searching in her bag for a while. I didn't see the sign. I didn't realize. She pulled out her driver's license and handed it to him. He started to examine it when his partner leaned out of his car and shouted, Forget it, Ernie. We've got an emergency call. Let's roll. The blaring sirens started up, made Melissa jump. Sorry, miss. The policeman tossed the license to her and jumped back into his car. She watched them roar off. Hey, listen, Paul said, smiling, acting very relieved. You got a break here, huh? I'd never get a break like that. That's for sure. Bye, she said, unlocking the car and slid behind the wheel. Whoa, wait, Melissa. I'm sorry. I gave you a hard time, he said, looking contrite. I was just having a little fun. I didn't mean. She slammed the door and missed the rest of what he had to say. The car started right up, and a few seconds later she pulled away, leaving him on the curb, staring after her, an unhappy expression on his face. She watched him in the rearview mirror, expecting him to disappear into thin air, but he didn't move. I've got to get rid of him, she thought, speeding through a yellow light, then making a sharp left turn. He's following me everywhere. He's taking over my life, and he wants to hurt me. A few minutes later, she parked the car in the drive, ran into the house, shouted hello to Marta, who was vacuuming the living room, and ran up to her room. No, she shouted. Paul, sitting on her bed, stood up quickly. No, leave me alone. Stop following me. Just leave me alone. Ignoring her pleas, he moved toward her quickly, and his dark eyes aglow. Oh my goodness. All right. I'm going to stop for tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and the full version will be on YouTube. And just throw this out there that I am the YA horror author of Vampire Juice, and I put my book on sale for 99 cents until New Year's Day. So thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow morning.